Hello and howdy! Welcome back to the Super Quick Deck Tech by popular demand from our Discord audience. Today we're going to be covering my Bristly Bill Weed and Seed deck, playing big creatures, big counters, and persistent mana. This deck tech, like I said, has been sponsored by our Discord audience here. If you'd like to be a part of that community to share your favorite decks, join down below in the description link. And if you enjoy what we do here on the Thoughtcast with Super Quick Deck Tech, pre-con mashups, and our podcast episodes, be sure to like and subscribe for more content. Now, on to the deck tech. This mono green deck is helmed up by Bristly Bill Spine Sower from the Outlaws of Thunder Junction set. For 1 and a green, you get a 2/2 plant druid with landfall. When a land enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. And an activated ability for 3 and double green, double the number of 1/1 counters on each creature you control. Very clearly, what this commander is trying to do is two major components: play extra lands and double up the 1/1 counters on creatures you control. Coming down super cheap as he is, a 2-mana 2/2, this engine gets going very fast, very quickly. And so, as you would expect, a deck like this is utilizing the fact that we are mono green to get as much land ramp as possible, as much 1/1 counters on creatures, and said big creatures to hold the +1/+1 counters. And so that's the approach I've taken into building this deck here. I kind of just wanted to play some of my favorite green things, A, for the fact that this is a mono color so we can get away with some of these mono green stuff, and B, I just had a bunch of really silly big dumb green things sitting around, and I've never really built mono green before, so I'd like to share with you all today some of the stuff that I've got in here. We're going to begin then with some of the collections of cards that care specifically, or are rather benefited the greatest in being a monocolor deck, and that is exemplified mostly with probably one of the best evasion creatures in the deck, Bellowing Tangleworm, a 3 and double green 4/4 worm with Intimidate, and gives other green creatures you control Intimidate. Intimidate is a semi-retired mechanic that they don't really use much anymore. It says that the creature with Intimidate cannot be blocked except by other creatures that share a color with this creature or artifact creatures. So, if a green creature, or all your green creatures, in the case of Tangleworm giving it there, has Intimidate, those creatures can no longer be blocked by anything that isn't an artifact creature or green, and that helps push through the combat damage and on some of the ones that don't necessarily have trample immediately, so this helps make sure that those creatures are getting through as often as possible. Another green payoff that is very, very good in a variety of decks, but is exemplified tenfold with the fact that this is just mono green, is Defiler of Vigor. 3 and double green for a 6/6 Phyrexian worm with trample. As an additional cost to cast green permanent spells, you can pay 2 life, and the spell costs green less to cast if you paid life this way. And whenever you cast a green permanent spell, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. The cycle of Defilers from the Dominaria United have this all really, really cool attribute to them that, in a wordy kind of way that they have to do as far as rules text, it essentially reads that you have a Phyrexian green mana pip to cast green permanent spells. And in a variety of different shells, this kind of effect is very, very useful. But again, because we are playing exclusively mono green, that trigger to not only have discounted mana cost, but also 1/1 counters across your entire team, which is what Bill wants to do as well, this card is one of the highlights of the deck. Another very cool support piece for our color specifically is Yeva, Nature's Herald, 2 and double green for a 4/4 legendary elf shaman with flash, and you may cast green creature spells as though they had flash. Again, a very useful card in a variety of different shells, especially elves, but again, because we are playing mono green in here, this kind of benefit is just tenfold better than almost anything else you could include it in, and the flash on surprise blockers is very, very cool. Obviously, as you would expect, because we're playing green, we've got land ramp related pieces, and we are playing some iconic ones like Skyshroud Claim, but also some other specific ones like Glimpse the Core. This can also be the other named forest ones specifically, like Nature's Lore 3 Visits. I just didn't have any extra spare copies of those, but just like what we've been talking about, is cards like these, you see them show up in a variety of green X combination styles of decks, but because we are focused in mono green, in forests specifically, the value on ramp pieces like these go up drastically. But a really fun one that I have in here that you don't see traditionally outside of mono green decks like these is a card called Nissa's Triumph, a double green sorcery that searches your library for up to 2 basic forest cards. If you control a Nissa Planeswalker, instead search your library for up to 3 land cards. Reveal them, put them into your hand, and then shuffle after. We do actually have a benefit here of having 2 other Nissa cards in the deck. We're going to be talking about one of them a little bit later here. And this is definitely an unconventional type of green ramp spell. Obviously, with 2 mana, you would prefer these lands to go down into play. But the fact that this can, in any scenario, tutor up to 3 forest cards, that if you've got the means down to play any extra lands, or just need to have the lands in hand to make sure that you've always got landfall triggering of not only Bill, but the other landfall cards that we have in this deck, things like Avenger of Zendikar and Scoot Swarm and things of that nature, this is very, very cool. This is the most efficient way to tutor out many, many lands out of the deck as possible. Another one of my favorite pieces in here that is specifically caring about the green they were casting is a recursion piece called Once and Future, a 3 and a green for an instant that returns target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. Put up to 1 other target card from your graveyard on top of your library, and then you exile Once and Future. However, it has Adamant. If at least 3 green mana was spent to cast this spell, instead return those cards to your hand and exile Once and Future. So, for 4 mana, if you don't have the Adamant clause, it puts 1 card from your graveyard to your hand and another card on top of your library. But if you cast this using Adamant, which is going to happen 100% of the time because we are mono green, this is going to be 4 mana, get 2 cards at instant speed back from your graveyard. That's very, very cool. To me, honestly, one of the Lich Pen cards that I decided to kind of build this deck around, and I'll get into the theming here in just a little while here, but I picked up that really cool Sheldon Spellbook Secret Lair and had this Eladamri's Vineyard that I wanted to play into something, and this was kind of the direction that I was thinking of when wanting to make this deck in the first place, so we're playing it here in this deck. It is a simple, just green mana enchantment that at the beginning of each player's main phase, each player's main phase, that player adds green. Because we are playing mono green, this is most beneficial to us rather than our opponents. But it's actually a very, very fun enchantment. This kind of thing coming down early and speeding everybody up in game progress, you'd be surprised, like, as compared to something like a Howling Mine that does grant that kind of benefit to all the players here. Giving somebody just mana, and specifically just green mana, even if they are or aren't green or whatever, like, we're going to take advantage of this mana that we're getting off of this way more frequently than our opponents would be. It's a very, very cool enchantment. But we would be silly if we weren't capitalizing any bit on the +1/+1 counters that Bill provides. So another half of this deck, more or less, is taking advantage of the fact that counters are being placed onto creatures all the time with land drops and other effects that put +1/+1 counters. So the other half of this deck that isn't just playing big dumb green stuff is capitalizing on the 1/1 counter synergies, and one of the best ones we have is Evolution Sage, 2 and a green for a 3/2 elf druid. Landfall: whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, proliferate. Proliferating is adding an additional counter onto any number of your permanents or players that you choose. It doesn't exponentially grow as fast as like the doubling up that Bill can do, but if we start using Bill and put +1/+1 counters across a few little pieces here or there, then every landfall, you can actually also stack the triggers in such a way that Bill puts a +1/+1 counter on something first, then Evolution Sage proliferates, so you kind of get a 2-for-1 Bill benefit. We have Kami of Whispered Hopes 2 and a green for a 1/1 spirit that if one or more 1/1 counters will be put on a permanent you control, that many +1 of those counters are put instead, and it taps to add X mana in any one color, where X is its power. So it always naturally taps for 1 because it's always just a 1/1, but this is one of the better ideal targets to put 1/1 counters onto that isn't going to be a combat-focused creature, because as you throw more counters onto it, it starts generating more mana, and then especially if you start comboing this with like Bill, where you can use your lands to activate Bill's ability to double your 1/1 counters, leaving up Kami, then you make mana off of Kami later, and you've done all that doubling up on the counters on him, that is just start exponentially growing your mana. It's really stupid, honestly. I would almost argue Kami of Whispered Hopes might be one of the most powerful cards in the list. A personal favorite of mine as a 2-for-1 gotcha spell is called Inspiring Call. 2 and a green for an instant. It draws a card for each creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it, and those creatures gain indestructible until end of turn. What a way to absolutely hose somebody's game plan if they're going to wrath your board because it is way too excessively big, and then you just suddenly not only refill your hand, but give all of those creatures indestructible. That is just a way to absolutely blow out the game. Some of the usual suspect green enchantments that care about 1/1 counters, Branching Evolution and Hardened Scales find their way in here, just because why wouldn't you? You know, the Hardened Scales acting in a similar way to Kami Whispered Hopes, Branching Evolution specifically being a doubler. These are both very big benefits that care about what Bill is trying to do, so of course they're here. I had mentioned that one of the theme ideas that I wanted to build out of this deck is, for lack of a better term, I really liked the idea of what Omnath, Locus of Mana, was able to do, and that Omnath is not in this deck, but the kind of core concept of what that Omnath does is here. We're looking to generate as much mana as humanly possible using our forests and things of that nature, and then storing it for purposes, mostly to dump into Bill's activated ability during like off turns and things like that, but to also just play a bunch of big creatures as fast as possible. So some of our forest exponential growth abilities here is things like Nissa, who shakes the world, who has some other activated abilities on her for her loyalty, but what's most important part about her is the whenever you tap a forest for mana, you add an additional green. That's the benefit that we're looking here for off of this Nissa card, but we have other cards in here that are doing a similar feel. One of those said pieces that's in here is definitely something, if you're interested to build this kind of deck, you do not have to include this card because it is called a game changer. It's Vorinclex, Voice of Hunger. He does double up mana for us, that's why he's in here, but please feel free to take this card out of the build if you are not a fan of either the game changer cards or Vorinclex himself, so you could certainly swap this one out, but as an enjoyer of Vorinclex, Voice of Hunger, he's going to stay in here as a mana doubler. Caged Sun is also another very cool piece that doubles up our mana. This also plays into the we're playing mono green package as well. Caged Sun is probably one of the best cards that you can be playing when you are playing a deck that is a mono color. It's a 6 mana artifact that as it enters, you choose a color. In our instance, it'll be green. Creatures you control of the chosen color get +1/+1, and when a land's ability adds 1 or more mana of the chosen color, you add an additional mana. So this makes all of our forests tap for 2, and also just boosts up our green creatures, which is a very nice benefit. You could also be playing Gauntlet of Power in this same slot as well for something that does a very similar effect, but for 1 mana less. I just didn't have a spare, but I had a Caged Sun, and we're playing it. Wilderness Reclamation kind of suits into this category as well as doubling up your mana, because you can spend your mana during the turn, and then at that untap step, at your end step, you do get to untap all of those lands. So for lack of a better term, this does allow you to have your lands produce you double the mana, just split across different phases of the turn. And if we pair that up with the cards that we're about to get here in just a minute, the not Omnath cards, the Wilderness Reclamation helps expedite that mana that we can throw into those cards. Which leads me then to some of the silliest cards I have in here, because like I said, I liked the idea of what Omnath did, but I just didn't have an Omnath to spare, but I had a couple of these cards sitting around. This is Fangorn, Tree Shepherd. 4 and triple green for a 4/10 legendary tree folk. Gives tree folks you control vigilance. Whenever one or more tree folk you control attack, add twice that much green. And most specifically, you don't lose unspent green mana as steps and phases end. This is your poor man's Omnath, is what I'm essentially getting at. I love this idea of banking up your excess amount of mana to hold on to start exponentially throwing into at least Bristly Bill or some other activated abilities that you can do off turn. It just, the idea behind that is just so freaking sweet to me that it was the whole driving force of what I wanted to make this deck, a sort of not Omnath style thing where we're banking up all this green mana and spending it. Alongside the Eladamri's Vineyard, it's kind of the idea that I wanted to build this deck off of. The secondary card that I wanted to build around is called Upwelling, which is a proto-Omnath, if that makes any sense. It's a 3 and a green for an enchantment. Mana pools don't empty at the end of phases or turns. Now, this does affect everybody, but like Eladamri's Vineyard, this is actually plays in a very, very fun way. You just suddenly tell everybody that they no longer have to worry about losing their mana as they proceed through combat steps and second main and end of turn and things of that nature. It just, the dynamic of the game changes when everybody has to start thinking about what they could potentially do with the spare mana at somebody's end step that they just float into the Upwelling. And obviously for our benefit as well, this is huge, right? Like, we can carry over the Eladamri's Vineyard mana, we can carry over all of this doubled up forest mana, because one of the biggest problems when playing cards like those that say you add up all this excess of mana, if you have nowhere to put that mana immediately, that just ends up being a waste of resources. So a card like Upwelling that's going to hold on to that mana for us long term is so silly fun. Is it good? No, probably not. But that was kind of the goal of what this deck was looking to be. It obviously, Bristly Bill is a very strong and powerful legendary creature. If we dial him back to still do the really, really cool thing, which is going to be banking up a bunch of mana into cards like Upwelling and Fangorn and start doing his activated ability on repeat as many times as we can, that's still very, very powerful and very cool and strong, but is not the pinnacle top of the line that it absolutely could be. And that's what I love so much about this deck. And that leads me then into the last category I want to talk about, which is just the cool cards that I wanted to play in this deck. You don't see cards like these all the time show up in traditional powered up lists like this here. So I just had some standout notable ones that I wanted to share you all with here. Starting with one of my favorite other evasion cards that isn't Bellowing Tangleworm, Challenger Troll. 4 and a green for a 6/5 troll, that each creature you control with power 4 or greater can't be blocked by more than one creature. One of the biggest issues with big boy creatures, again, if they don't end up having trample, is trying to swing them into, especially like token boards. Those tokens are going to just dogpile onto one big creature, and especially if that token deck is something like an Aristocrats, that they're going to want to have their tokens die. So something like Challenger Troll, it reads that multi-blocking is now no longer an option. Your creatures with power 4 or greater can now only be defeated by one-on-one combat, and yes, that could still lead into things like chump blocking with a token, but you get the satisfaction of being able to make sure you're always going to combat more frequently because you're not going to have to worry about a bunch of spirits gang piling up on your big boy creature. We were talking about playing some green devotion style stuff, and one of the biggest pieces in here that helps benefit that package is Gigantosaurus. I'm playing this version that you were given from the Foundations promo box. It's green, 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 green for a 10/10. Easily the wackiest creature, other than maybe the next one we're about to talk about, is Nacatl War Pride, a very strange, weird little friend from Future Sight that also benefits the mono green devotion package while having triple green in its mana cost. It is 3 and triple green for a 3/3 cat warrior. Nacatl War Pride must be blocked by exactly one creature if able, so like the Challenger Troll, multi-blocking is not an option with this Nacatl War Pride. However, whenever it attacks, you create X tokens that are tapped and attacking that are copies of Nacatl War Pride, where X is the number of creatures defending player controls, and you remove the tokens from the tokens are removed at the end of the turn. They're exiled. You exile the tokens at end of turn. It's very strange. It's very weird. And especially if you can get the power boosted up on this original copy as well, so he doesn't keep, because he'll probably die in combat when it comes to swinging out at somebody. This usually ends up being like a one-shot combat effect, but if you can boost up the power of Nacatl War Pride and constantly make tokens of itself going at somebody that the token copies have to be blocked by basically everything they control, this is another very powerful sometimes combat deterrent that allows your other big creatures to get in. Easily the most rules confusing headache card that is in here, though, is Pan Glacial Worm. Again, just because I had one and we're in green and we're searching our libraries a good bit, so I just thought it'd be funny to have a surprise worm every once in a while. 5 and double green for a 9/5 worm with trample that while you're searching your library, you may cast Pan Glacial Worm from your library. So, like, I don't know how else to describe this other than just like, oh, you're gonna go, if you draw a late game land tutor card, something like the Rampant Growth or the Explosive Vegetation or Skyshroud Claim, or even any of the other cards that continually allow you to search your library, the stuff like Primeval Herald and things like that. Anytime you get the opportunity to go searching, you have this chance for 7 mana to cast the Pan Glacial Worm. That's it. I have no other reasoning behind this other. I thought the ability was cool, so that's why he's here. Speaking of weird fun boys, though, Rampant Frogantula, one of my favorite pieces from the Omo precon from Modern Horizons 3. 2 and a green for a 3/3 frog with trample that it gets +10/+10 for each player who has lost the game, and when it deals combat damage to a player, you may mill that many cards, and then you put any number of lands from among them onto the battlefield tapped. Obviously does a very big collection of things that we want to do. Naturally has trample, so it holds +1/+1 counters very, very well. It gets itself a boost when other players are knocked out of the game, which is kind of a thing that this deck is able to do. You can really knock out people one at a time because that's just kind of how big creature combat works. You're going to be not necessarily swinging wide at everybody, but swinging really, really tall at one person. So the Frogantula buff will probably kick in at least once, and then the returning land package that it is able to do, which benefits Bill with landfall, the other cards in here that care about getting your forests into play, things of that nature. It's very, very fun. He's my favorite sweet little boy. But as a whole, that's the package. We are playing land ramp, we are playing big dumb creature idiots, and we're doing 1/1 counter synergy, with some of my own personal flair thrown in here for just spice and flavor and fun and stupid stuff. And honestly, stupid stuff is a very good way to describe what this deck is all about. We're playing big green idiots, we're playing big green ramp, and we're playing big green idiots. Stupid stuff. I repeated myself. That's okay. That's what the deck is about. We're repeating all of these big green creatures down, and it's very, very fun. I love playing this deck a lot. Monocolor can sometimes be a very tough challenge to build around, as you don't end up getting a ton of the pieces that help support from other colors to obviously like do what the deck is trying to do. But mono green in specific, when you aren't playing like elves, It just is so open-ended and fun. You get to play just all these big, stupid creatures and just go swinging and be the best at land ramping, and it's amazing. It's one of my favorite new decks that I have built over the course of this previous year, and I'd love to hear from you, your thoughts about this deck. Be sure to drop comments down below what you think about this. Also, go down into the description. You can check out the full deck list that I have written up in there. Thank you all for hanging out with me here and checking out this deck tech with me. If you want to see the full deck list, it's available in the description down below. You can comment here and tell me about some of the pieces that you would play in a mono green deck like this. And if you want to talk about this deck with me, come join us over on our Discord channel where you can yell at me about all the pieces that I'm playing wrong in this shell. But thank you so much for checking out the super quick deck tech. I hope you all have enjoyed, and we'll see you all again next time here on the MTG Thoughtcast.